Okay, the recording started.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is the February 26th meeting of the Joint Capital Planning Committee, sometimes called JCPC. And as chair, I'm calling the meeting to order, seeing that we have a quorum. And what I'll do is just call out people's names as I see them on my screen to make sure you can hear and be heard because we're conducting this meeting virtually. Bob?
Present.
Nat?
Here.
Sarah?
Here.
Lee?
Present.
And Bridget.
Present.
Thank you, everyone. We have a fairly straightforward agenda today. One set of project proposals on IT, and Jennifer Lafontaine has joined us also. She is from Finance Department. One set of projects on IT, a set of minutes that we don't actually have to review because they have been a review, but I'll just take a few minutes during the minute slot of the agenda to talk about taking of minutes. And we have volunteers. Almost everyone except for two people have volunteered for at least one set. Sarah reviewed this set, so they are ready to be posted. And I'll remind people what the process is to expedite. So, Melissa, I'm turning it over to you, and I'm for the IT projects. And I don't know whether you were planning on having Sean join us.
I did ask him to join us, and I did send him a nudge.
Okay.
So I can see.
I don't see anyone in participants. I mean,
Mm.
out in. Do you want to do yours first then, or you want to
Sure.
do you want to do the summary? You had a
Here we go.
Sean's here.
Okay, there we are.
Hey, Sean.
Thanks. I got bailed out. Thank you.
Oh,
I'm starting to sweat it. So, but we can do, I posted, within the last hour, a very rough draft of the, let me just pull it up for you all to see. Um, so this is the summary of the funding. And while I don't have the walkthrough to the previous, remember I had showed you the one that matches with
Yep.
the projections that we present at BCG. Jen and I and Holly looked at this, reviewed it, agreed on our debt estimates as of today, just so you know that we are in the process of refinancing some debt right now. We have some stuff coming up in May. The numbers will get more crystallized, as we actually issue that debt and we get our real interest rate and our real payment schedule. So these are our back of the napkin guesses, but we made sure that these estimates are the same as what is going to be projected in BCG, which I believe is next week. So, just sort of along that same theme that all the information in all the committees, although they're coming through in different formats, tie together. And so we spent a lot of time making sure they were exactly the same and that. So with that, what I will say is that, we have what we've known is that the 6,700,000 is our, 10.5% that we are using to, use as our cash or use as our capital goal for the year, for the fiscal year. And then in addition to that, the debt exclusion is operated on top. This is an updated number of the 2 million. Again, that's an estimate because we have not borrowed the second round of financing for the school. But that is basically Fort River School, which is above and beyond this 10.5%. We have finalized the numbers for the community preservation contribution, as well as the Comcast, and then this other is money that is going to come in from in this case, all of this is ambulance fund transfers that usually goes through this process, and it's appropriated from receipts reserved for appropriation to fund capital in the ambulance fund. I had made an objective to try and keep new borrowing authorizations to a minimum in this year because we have so much large capital items coming in the future, and I want to leave room for us to be able to do that and still have cash capital. So I was trying to get this number to be as small as possible. I was actually trying for it to be zero, but I wasn't successful in that.
I'm sorry, what
Um,
number? What number? I don't see that you're,
See the borrowing
Oh,
number
here.
here?
thank you. Oops.
I wanted to not have any new borrowing initiatives with this capital round. But I just couldn't figure that out. So here is the all of our general fund debt, including CPA. Projected debt, that's just the interest I expect on our long-term, our short-term notes for this year. It's a number. The pay down of bands is also in this 2.2 million. And then new projects that you'll see on the list for the that's coming in the next couple of pages is 5.5 right now. That would be new capital cash projects. You'll see down here that we don't, I wanted to give you some work, I guess, right? So that is not in balance. So, decisions need to be made on, do we fund everything in that list? Do we borrow more? Or do we delay some projects? So we're out of balance in this fiscal 26 right now, about $500,000. I'll tell you quite honestly that the projected numbers into the future, I had made no attempt to forecast the future for today's meeting. I was solely concentrated on, are the numbers for this year correct, knowing that the numbers of the out years have not been balanced, but they are consistent with what we had projected in the past. And I did move some of the projects that were scheduled to start in 2026, but aren't starting for various reasons. I did move them into future years, but I didn't really reevaluate the numbers, change the interest rates in future years. I concentrated mostly on this year and making these estimates as good as I could. That's not very good English. Apologize for that. So this is our list. It's 3 pages long of the requests. A lot of the color notations here, Jen did ask me to sort of explain while I was putting the information together, if it was a new request, new this year, and it fell in 2026, I highlighted it in red. That was for me. And then I kept it because it's good for discussion purposes in this draft, so this $1 million right here in facilities, it's not really new. They asked for 500,000 for roofs last year, but what we had made a discussion earlier this month to talk about facilities in a different way, so that the request looks new, but just so you know, it's just not itemized. They're going to try and make a more global look at it. And when they come to the meeting, they can explain it to you more. But that's what the difference between the red and the blue are. This is a total of $7.2 million of requests in this year. That's funded by 1.1. I have associated to borrow. 5.5 million is capital, and about $600,000 is from ambulance funds as we currently have it allocated. Again, this is part of what we'll look at. Today's conversation is around IT, which is on the second page, and that's why Sean is here. But that my summary of kind of where what we got to these numbers, and I should say before Sean gets into the individual requests that he has for his department, that the the numbers here have, we have made some decisions internally that you should know about. You know, a lot of departments requested more than what's being presented here, but we're making a decision to try and concentrate on using cash capital so that we don't have interest income expense, and that we also want to limit new borrowing initiatives right now, especially for smaller projects, because we have some huge projects coming and we need to be able to have the room for that in the coming years. So that was what I was going to say about that. And so we did all of the vehicles on this request. Most of the requested vehicles this year were bumped to future years, with the exception of a portion of the police department's request for vehicles and vehicles that were damaged last year and are in need of replacement versus like, this one is getting old and I want to replace it. This truck, there is a truck on here that was in a crash and is no longer operational for that purpose. And so that stayed on the list this year. And that was kind of how we worked through some internal, what to prioritize so that we could give you a list to look at and make decisions about that, about other priorities that you have. But, that's kind of where we are. And I see that Sarah has a question. Is it for me or did you want to ask Kathy?
For you, if
Uh-huh.
you're done.
Mhm.
And I'm trying to take notes while listening, which is a mistake perhaps, but I didn't catch what all the colors stand for. So could you repeat that? And are they defined? Because I haven't looked at this document yet. Are they explained?
At the bottom.
Okay, then never mind. You don't have to.
Yeah, so red is a new request that I saw for the first time this year, or it seemed new to me. And blue is there's been some kind of update to the dollar amount. It's gone up in cost, or we've moved it for the year, or both.
Great. How about the resident capital requests we talked about?
They are not on here specifically. Some of them are inclusive of the other departments, and when those departments come in. So in particular, there are some in the public works department around traffic improvements and traffic calming. Specifically, there are correlations between that general request in that department and specific requests by Residents Capital. And I've already talked with Guilford a little bit about whether or not, those can be moved in here. That yes, we're going to do some traffic calming things, and of the money we're spending this year, we're going to do one of the resident requests. So they are not actually on this list specifically, but we did present them to you last time, but they would have to come in inclusive of these other departments. So kind of in conjunction with their sort of larger asks here.
Kathy, can I ask a follow-up?
Yeah, you can do it because I have a separate set of questions.
Yeah, well, but there's money set aside specifically for the resident request. So wouldn't that be allocated to the department if it's?
We don't actually set anything aside, Sarah. So it's always been a either is it encompassed in an existing number, or do we actually, as a committee, recommend an increase? So, for example, last year, we increased the line for traffic signs, traffic calming for the various flashing lights. That was an explicit recommendation that then the town manager did do. I mean, we had to balance it off, but we found money to do that. So there's, for a variety of reasons, we've never had an open line item saying, we think we're going to fund something, call it resident, and then you can't find it called resident except by reading the words in the town manager's final plan, which says some of this money is for. Okay.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Just, we've never had it. So Melissa, I know we're just looking at this for the very first time, but could you go back to the summary table?
Mhm.
I have a couple questions on that, having stared at this now for 6 years. One is the state aid in the capital plan, we've always shown chapter 90, and it's always
Yeah.
about the same number, 890,000.
Yep.
This time, there's not, and it's a wash because it comes in as a revenue and it goes out as an expense, but it is in addition to the road money that we're allocating, so we don't make a
Yep.
decision about it, and I'm seeing that you're not showing it.
Yeah, so we had a discussion internally about this, partly brought up by the meeting that we had when we went over public works, which is with the area that in which this is covered. And also, um, after we received your questions about it. So when I was talking about it with Guilford and the Public Works team and Paul, I said, well, it's kind of confusing to put it in there because those funds are not they're not sort of under the purview of this department. They're sort of stand outside of JCPC, but they're an important notation, I believe, and I would include it in the description when we put through for roads and sidewalks. There's usually a large number, and there is a large request in this for additional funding for roads and sidewalks that, we expect $800,000 of state aid that will complement this this capital request. Similarly, many of the other requests in the departments, so you'll see one thing that I remember from other communities and is coming up again here is that turnout gear for the fire department. There is an annual cost for turnout gear for the fire department. And there are also grants available for that turnout gear. And so this year they're asking for significantly less than they've asked for in years past because they have some grant money in order to buy additional turnout gear. Therefore, the amount that they need for turnout gear this year is less. And so while they're only asking for 20, it typically costs them $50,000 a year. This year they're still spending 50,000, but the request that comes through JCPC is a matching number. And so to me, what makes more sense and, kind of what we talked about internally is to sort of say, the grant money, which Chapter 90 is essentially, it's an entitlement type of grant, but it is grant money, does not fall within this is general fund money and tax revenue to support capital, which is separate from other funding sources like a grant or a state aid. So that's why we took it out.
But, well, we can come back to this next time, but I would argue against taking it out because it's a regular allocation. And yes, JCPC doesn't say anything about it other than in addition to whatever cash we put in roads, there's this, but it's always been in the capital plan, always. And one of the interesting things of always seeing it is the state is not increasing it. And I think to lose the path I'm talking about the town manager's capital improvement plan, that line has always appeared in it. So I think taking it out is a mistake, and we can come back to that. And then I have one other question, and I see that Bridget has one. In the projected debt, where is the Jones Library?
Jones Library, there is no debt for currently for the Jones Library. There is projected debt in the future years. So, there's no, projected debt is here. But like I said, right now there is no new, like the $1 million from last year, if you project it in this year, what it does is it takes that away from things that we could actually spend it on.
No, I
So,
understand. Does this mean, the reason I'm asking is that if the project moves forward, you will have to, it triggers the $46 million or the.
correct, yeah.
And so I think we have to show it. Now, what I don't know is in FY26, which is the year that starts in July of FY25, how much will be in that 12-month cycle, but I think we have to show it because we can't until we say that project is not a go in FY '26, we don't have that money to spend. So that's, I think it has to be in the line. So I don't know.
So that $200,000 is interest expense for bands.
Okay, so that's Jones, and then Jones is included in that, and then you have it.
And then in the
Ramp-
actual debt, any authorized debt that I'm projecting a small pay down on short-term debt.
Okay,
So like if we had to borrow $1 million or $2 to get Jones started before the end of the fiscal year, which we may or may not, but if we had to do that, then we could do a pay down of that of,
Okay.
100 or 200,000, and that is included. We did have some money in this actual debt for debt that is authorized but unissued that we anticipate we will have to borrow. There's about $5 million that we anticipate we'll have to borrow of previous authorizations.
okay, so these are different numbers than we've seen in the past, but you're saying that they are in there in either one line or the other line. Jones
Yep.
is in. Okay.
Yep.
That was my question. And I see.
Not at the same level that you've seen it in the past, to be fair. Because
Yeah,
I
I
don't,
think-
I don't anticipate borrowing $15 million, tomorrow for it.
Okay,
Mhm.
Bridget.
My question is just like a really logistical one, like,
Mm.
is there a chat or someone where you can put the links to the document? Because when I go into the Civic Engage document center last night, they were there, but right now when I link through, it says no documents. So I'd just like to be able to read it.
We don't have a chat, but you go into the amherstmass.gov, then you
Yep.
go to JCPC.
Yep.
And this
Yeah.
document that we're looking at, it wasn't there this morning. So Melissa said she just added it now. Then you have to go into the packets and the packet for today. So what I suggest, since we're all seeing it literally for the first time, we'll come back to it next week. So people can look at it. And Melissa, I don't know whether you know which set of projects she'll be coming to us with next
I've
week.
asked a couple of departments. Nobody's got back to me about their best date.
Okay, so if you can at least let us know, even if they haven't put them in, then we can focus, the next set of sheets show what those projects are, so people can at least look at both the summary table and
Mhm.
the project list, if that makes sense to people,
Mhm.
to come back to this in the context, we'll be looking at additional departments next week.
Mhm.
Bridget, we don't have any chats in this for me to
Yeah, I
actually
know.
type it in for you.
I found it following what you said, but what had been sent last night, when I clicked through to that, it didn't go to the same things. I was able before to find the IT one.
Right, and so this is now, in addition to what was in for IT, this has been now put in, so this document is, I just clicked on it, it's the only reason I know, because I found it, I'm able to look at it over in my iPad. So Nat, I see your hand is up.
Yes, just in terms of navigating this new document, if I look at the very bottom for FY '26, it comes out grand total of 7.28 whatever
Mhm.
million.
Yep.
I'm wondering, does this appear on the first summary page anywhere? Where would I find that 7.23?
So I believe that it's the 5, I believe it's the 5509
Right.
plus the 1,000,001 plus the 674.
So what she's saying, Nat, is that part of it's being borrowed, so it's not showing up as the cash.
I see.
And so you're seeing them, in the year we borrow the money, it doesn't show up as, it bumps up. If we approve that project, it's gonna bump up actual debt once it's on the books.
Okay, got it.
Lee?
I'm just wondering if any of the activities that are going on in Washington, DC impact what we're thinking about for our budgets?
So I will say that this particular it impacts budgets as a whole, like when we think of the overall community. And when we think about capital, this capital before this committee is generated from tax dollars, local tax dollars. So that number is money that we will collect. So it doesn't impact this directly. However, many of these departments, specifically, I was looking at sustainability has an annual appropriation in the capital plan to fund projects within the community that elevate or increase our sustainability in the town of Amherst. It's a large ask annually, and she's usually able to use that money in conjunction with federal grants. And so when I was trying to, pare down all these requests and I looked at that, initially I had sort of reduced that slightly, knowing how harmful that is based on the fact that she's losing money in other places. So I would say to some things that because federal money helps support a lot of capital that isn't shown in this committee, that they are
Yeah.
losing money in other places. So
Yeah.
this request, they have a larger dependence on. I would say it that way.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And Lee, the one that could potentially directly affect these estimates is the library has 2 federal grants.
Oh, so many things.
No, but
So
that,
many things.
no, but those 2, there's an assumption that we will have those grants in these numbers, in terms of sources of funds. Otherwise, the school project is funded by a tax increase, so it's not going to be directly affected by federal. So these are all in the packet, and I think everyone, all these questions are excellent. So as more occur to you, coming back with them next week in the context of more projects, because one of the issues that you can see, as Melissa said, she's focused on 26, but 27, 28, 29, and 30 don't look very good in terms of the bottom line. So that easy, we'll just borrow a bit, doesn't work as well when we get out to the future. And we'll spend at least a little bit of time looking at the whole 5 years, but most of it will focus on FY26. So I think we can move on, Melissa, to IT.
To just IT's request, and he's done a spreadsheet, so I'm going to just share that with you guys instead of this, because then we can just look at, and I don't know what this is here, but we can just look at his spreadsheet so that instead of the whole larger picture, because if you want, Sean, just let me know if you want me to put up your individual form requests as well.
Ready for me to jump into it?
Yeah.
Okay. So thanks. For anybody who I haven't met yet, I'm Sean Hannon. I'm the IT director for the town. Most of this is pretty boring and hopefully straightforward. The main thing we tend to ask for every year in capital is it falls under the line of infrastructure, and it's basically all the normal equipment that we replace on some sort of cycle. And so what you can see is everything up to the infra, and this was
Right.
just kind of a draft spreadsheet we put together. So some of the not everything's spelled out completely, but the infra total is our infrastructure. So on an annual basis, we replace trying to think it works out to about 75 PCs every year. We go about 5 years on our computers. Servers we replace on a cycle, and you can see those going out. We did this out 10 years just because for us, there's some things that end up being a 5-year cycle, and it's easier for us to catch them when we do a 5-year plan. They end up falling off the last year, so that's why you see 10 years out. Servers, we're not asking for anything this year. Switches is network switches, so that's basically what's in every building that connects to the fiber, that connects all the equipment together. The UPS is the battery backup system that it's a fairly expensive one, and it's because it's in police department, and it basically runs battery backup for all of our servers, but it also backs up the dispatch center. So it's hardwired, and all the computers in dispatch and basically all the equipment in the dispatch center is powered by that. And then telephones, we replaced our phone system about 5 years ago, and the handsets tend to fail slowly. So we're just starting to plan to replace some of those every year. So that's where you see the subtotal of 219. That's that equipment. The next one, I don't know if we want to just run through
Yep.
everything and then take all the questions at the end, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Okay. The next one down is the disaster recovery system. That's one that I hope to eliminate. We applied for a community compact grant for that equipment, and it's basically the town's turn to get one of those. A state will give us one of those every other year, typically. So we believe we have a pretty good shot at getting that. The state has a pool of money. They tend to not have enough money to fund everybody's request fully. So we anticipate that they may come back and offer us less than what we asked for. So that number we hope to reduce or eliminate. If we reduce it, it should be reduced pretty significantly. The next one's a little more involved in the description of it, but it's in conjunction with Melissa's department, and it's a budgeting. It's in there as budgeting software, but it's really a whole system for how we basically the whole process of the budget cycle. And it does some really neat things. It takes our stuff from Munis, it puts it in there, and so it offers a lot of transparency as far as how money is spent in town, and gives anybody who's interested kind of a real-time view of that. It also gives department heads a much easier way to access their budgets and see where they are during the year on their budget spend. Right now we use a system called Munis, which you've probably seen reports from, and they're not very user friendly. So as new department heads start and they want to see how much of their budget they've spent, it's not very user friendly. So this would enhance that. So I don't know if you have anything you wanted to add to that, Melissa, or
Sure. So there are, I looked at a couple of different softwares that are available and used by our peer communities here in Massachusetts, that they're like budget and planning software. This particular, the one, of course, that is the most robust and has the most to offer is the most expensive. There are cheaper versions than this large acquisition. And I would say, though, that the one that I would say that although that in the implementation, the upfront cost of it is significantly more, the ongoing year-over-year support, meaning the long-term use of it, those prices are very comparable. So we would get them by spending a little bit more in the upfront. And that's why the request is so high. So, if you might ask me, could you do this for less? And I would say, yes, we absolutely could. I could probably do it for, under $20,000, but the maintenance cost would still be $35,000 a year. So what would we get in the long run would be much better if we spent a little bit more upfront. So I just want to, full disclosure, are there less expensive options? Yes, there are. The one that I am most interested in is a software that we are familiar with. We have other versions of that here in the community, and it has it's a budget and planning software. So it doesn't just do budgets, it does financial reports, planning reports. It has a community outreach feature. It has interactive maps. It creates a lot of every document that you put out that's a PDF, there is an issue with ADA compliance. These, they're called dashboards that it creates for our budget and our financial documents for both internal users, such as the Finance Committee, JCPC. It has a huge capital module for this kind of planning. And it goes back to and links to all the data that we have used in the past. So the historical data can be pulled forward from how we've reported it in Munis, and then presents it in a different way. And these spreadsheets that we give you here, they're all in trying to do the same thing and being completely transparent, but I find them to be really challenging. And I know that we've had several discussions in this committee and in other committees about how they're not the same, and that they're 7 different spreadsheets trying to communicate the same information, and do they all say the same things, and are they all pulling the same data? And it would make me feel more comfortable to have something where I know it's coming from our financial system, and then I can elaborate on it and give those quarterly reports, Kathy, that we give. We would be able to get them to update on their own, and then we would just need to write the narrative. We wouldn't have to do the, well, we report it this different way. We need to add another fund so that we can explain things. Because of the unique way that our relationships are between our school system and our town and the regional school, and what we report from there, and how we report the Amherst schools within the town budget, these sort of exceptions where you can't just spit a report out of Munis without explaining how one account is reflected in another. And it would, for the departments, one of the comments that we've received from many of our internal departments is not getting their monthly and quarterly, how am I doing in my department budget? Because it's more than just my operating budget, because so many of our departments are operating their departments with grants and revolving funds and gifts accounts in order to support the full operations of their department. So an department like rec department, or a department like council on aging, where they have revolving funds or gift accounts that help support their day-to-day operations, they can't see that all in one place. And this would allow us to build something that is easy for us to communicate with our departments, where reading financial reports is not it's not their job, it's not their specialty, it's not their interest, but it communicated into a way that is useful for them, and that they can be most effective in their departments, and we can do a better job of communicating to them and to the public about what these numbers really mean, and build consistency around it. So that's my big sell on that. It would save me a lot of time. I will say that selfishly, I would love it. But there are reasons beyond, the ease of use for me, but just sort of being able to give more consistent information. And then when you ask for questions of us of like, well, how much does it really cost to hire Melissa? What do her benefits cost? All that stuff would be pulling from our payroll system, and we'd be able to roll up the true cost of our benefits. And while they wouldn't say, well, Melissa, pick the most expensive health insurance plan, it would be able to say in the finance department, we spend X number of dollars on health insurance. In the IT department, we have this much liability for vacation. Like just sort of those sort of real numbers, because they would be associated with the liabilities that we are truly carrying in our payroll system. So it just would give us access to a lot of information that we manually calculate right now, that I think people have been asking for and we've been struggling to deliver on. So that's my yes,
Okay.
please.
I see,
Yeah.
I see Bob's hand is up and then Sarah.
Yeah, and just before
Mhm.
other questions, one last thing that's on there is the Jones, where it says Jones Library. That should just say Jones Library Infrastructure. So it's the town's support of Jones Library IT infrastructure. So it's basically the same sorts of things that we show at the top that adds up to that
Oh.
subtotal. It's that for the Jones Library, and why you see increases in FY27 is just in anticipation of them needing more equipments when they hopefully
Is
get
it-
renovated.
So Sean, is that actually equipment? Is that like PCs? Is that?
Yeah, it's mostly computers, printers, network switches, Wi-Fi access points. It's basically any of the IT capital equipment. So it's mostly PCs.
So Bob and then Sarah and Leah, I don't know whether your hand is now
Oh,
up for
no,
this.
sorry.
That's okay. So Bob, then Sarah, and then Bridget.
Yeah, Sean, I had a couple of questions.
Yeah.
The UPS battery backup, you don't have it down except for in FY26. It seems like that's something that we need to replace, or may need to replace sooner than, 10 years out or 11.
Yeah, and the reason I don't have that is I was just waiting to hear back from the vendor on what kind of estimated lifetime we should expect out of that. The one that we're on now is actually slightly over 10 years old. Luckily it's modular, and we've been able to replace parts in it. But it's end of life, end of support, so we can't buy parts for it anymore.
No.
So yeah, it should go in one of the future fiscal years. If I had to guess, I would say it's probably about 8 years that we should anticipate that, but not knowing that. But that's a good point. It definitely belongs in there in a out fiscal year as well. So
Okay.
thanks.
It's not in FY26, but what is a base map?
Oh, so base map is our GIS
Okay.
base map. So it's part of the flyover, but it also they do a flyover with LiDAR that ends up in GIS. But it does a lot more than just the imagery. What they do is they update all the foliage, but they update the buildings, and the engineering department uses that quite extensively for their planning when they designed the North Common. They used that base map with the features that were there, kind of as a starting point.
Okay.
And that's something we typically update every 5. Actually, I think it's a little more than 5 years. So
Okay. And maybe you covered this, but the fiber expansion again in 28 and 29. It's not in this year coming up, but you have a grant down there. Is that something that we can expect a grant for, or we would apply for a grant?
yeah, so we're gonna apply for a grant. It actually opens up March 10th. And it's the state tends to do offer those to cities and towns every other year. So it's basically our turn. And we expect that we will be eligible for it. We expect we would get it, and if that's the case, then we expect that we would eliminate both of those FY 28 and 29 asks. So.
Right, and if this is fiber expansion, I mean, is this just to expand fiber with that within our system, or?
Yeah, so we so as part of the last cable agreement, we no longer had access to the fiber optic cable that Comcast was providing as part of the franchise agreement. So the town used some of the franchise capital money to install fiber. So we have two fiber rings connecting most of our buildings, but we still have some places that are not connected. Our wastewater treatment plant, we have our ring is not closed in one spot. So we're working with UMass. UMass agreed to let us use their conduit, but now we need money to buy the fiber and have somebody install it and splice it and close that ring. And so
Yeah.
then we potentially would connect some of the other buildings.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Sarah?
Thank you. Excuse me, I just want to make sure Lee's okay. You all right, Lee?
yeah.
Okay, okay, you just, I don't know. Okay, good. So one question for Sean and then a bunch for Melissa, if I can. So the grant you've applied for the disaster recovery system, when do you expect to be notified about that?
I would expect in the next month or two. I would hope that we would know before potentially before you complete your JCPC process. It was, I don't know that they gave a date when they would announce it. I'll look and see when they've announced it historically. It kind of falls on typically under the lieutenant governor. But the deadline for it was late January that we applied for it. So I hope that my hope is to hear for it before you get too much further into this process.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
And now Melissa, about this fantastic software. What, if anything, do we currently spend on a subscription or maintenance or anything else? Is this all going to be net cost to us, or although
Yeah.
it'll be saving time for you and your,
Right.
but
So it is, so it depends. So right now we don't have anything as far as a budget software that we are spending a prescription on other than Munis, and Munis is a financial system and doesn't really do reporting very well. And so this is a reporting type of software for it. The one that I like and the one that I am looking at, the one that's more expensive, has a public outreach component to it that we currently use something for and have an annual subscription for that is about $10,000, if I remember correctly. If the people who use the public outreach product would be open to, eliminating that product and using the product that is sort of incorporated in this planning and financial budget planning software, then there could potentially be that that savings of the 10, but an addition of 35. So maybe we could save a little bit, but yes, this is all a new cost to the community.
okay, thank you. Let's see, I think you implied that if it doesn't include payroll or human resources functions, it can at least pull the data. Is that right?
Right, it can pull the data. So they multiple softwares, all of the softwares that I looked at have where they can receive data from our financial system, our payroll system, where you can, right now when we're projecting out next year's fiscal budget, we go through and get every single employee, what their step date is. Okay, they're going to be, Sean is on step 5. He's going to step 6 next year. That's going to happen in December. I'm making up things. I have no idea what John's anniversary is. And so what is his salary from July 1 to December 10th, and then what is it, December 11th. So we have to do all that on a spreadsheet manually. This would just pull the information. All those dates are in our payroll software, calculate those numbers out. Also, what's associated with Sean's and my personal record is the fact that I have X number of vacation days on the books that my I've elected health insurance, that I've elected dental, and so what are the true costs of employing Melissa Zawatsky?
Yeah, I understand the benefits. That's great. Okay, thank you. Does this by any chance integrate with the public schools financial system?
So it could. And when I first looked at the software, one of the things I suggested to this company, because they were the first ones to, they called cold and sold me. And then I looked at it, and I looked at my peers who had elected for it, and I was like, wow, this does a lot of things that we're trying to accomplish here. And one of the things I had hoped to do in order to save costs was to share that with the school department, so that we could do it together, and then we would the pricing is based on our overall budget. So yeah.
Well, does it go up or down, like per capita for
it goes up as the larger your budget is, the more it costs, right? And so the school's sort of included in our budgets in a lot of ways. So
I see. Okay.
and so I said, well, if the school used it too, then we could share the cost. So they said 2 things. One, I got them to quote me based on our budget, not including the school's budget, because we do report separately, right? And then the other thing was that they said, well, if you wanted to do both, that would be great, but you probably don't want to do them at the same time because of the amount of work it takes to roll them out. And the rollout for the schools would be completely different from ours because they do things differently. So I had reached out at the time to them, but then they had changes, and I haven't talked to Shannon again about this, but certainly if that was something they were interested in, it would be much easier if we rolled it out, if they did the same system that we were doing. It would be easier
Sure.
for their setup.
Now, I don't know to what extent you would, I mean, yeah, the department reports to the school committee, not to the town, but I don't know if you ever want the school data. If you do, can you pull it from the school's existing system with this?
So we see the Amherst schools data because they are, we do not see the regional schools data at all.
Right, but how do you see it? Do you see it only?
We see it in Munis. I mean,
okay.
I know how to, read that, but
and so that will still be available,
right,
to see if,
yeah.
Thank you. That's all.
Yeah, and the only thing I would add in terms of getting kind of quantifying how much time goes into the budget, we had about 5 years ago, Maria Rocca, who was half IT, half finance, would essentially disappear from IT for half the year to work on the budget. So I know at that point it was basically half of an FTE to prepare the budget. So I know that work's been divvied up and split out and spread across multiple people now, but I don't think the workload has decreased. So this would be considerably more efficient for people doing the budget.
And I will say to that is when Maria was the person doing it, yes, it was a lot of work for that one person, but she was the only person touching the sheets.
Mm.
And now we have all these sheets and all of us touching them. And I don't, Sean went in there and did something, and then I did something, just
Mhm.
as an example. Oh, now the capital plan forecast doesn't match the budget forecast, and they really need to be in alignment. And if we were all working from the same data, then, and we could see, who changed what, when, where, and how, then I mean, I spent hours trying to get these two these two Excel spreadsheets to say the same thing, And part of it is my learning Amherst process, but the other part is just that it's not in one place; it's in multiple places.
Yep.
Bridget?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Sean. Wow, just thinking of 75 computers a year, I'm getting some concept of how big your job is. So thanks for what you do.
Thanks.
And so I have a couple of questions, like from this 529,000, I can see if it was approved as is 100,000, that budgeting software line fully for the town, 35,000 fully for the library, but how does it divide up in terms of other departments like the town, public safety, schools, in terms of the cost per department of what your request is?
Yeah, so we don't break it out that way, but that's a good it's a good question. It's something that we probably should at some point consider even putting it in our operating budget, just kind of how things divide up. For the most part, if you were to look at the operating budget and look at where the FTEs fall per department, it's it's not one to one, but it's spread pretty evenly based on the number of users. Police, fire, and DPW are a little different because they tend to have more users than they do computers, whereas town hall, bangs, tend to have a PC, basically a PC per user. Um,
But
so
would you say
yeah,
though like in capital, it's not one to one, like you said, but in the operating, I mean, different departments have specialty softwares that you as the IT department carry the annual cost for, right? So like
yeah, yeah. So that would show up in operating, but
Mhm.
in terms of capital, I would I would say it's roughly proportional to the number of users per department. Um, we could get an exact number of PCs per um, department, but it's basically it's everything but the schools.
Okay, so the schools aren't included in.
Correct. Yeah, it's everything but the schools, and obviously the libraries are separated out.
Okay, super. And one more question.
Yeah.
I was looking back at last year and then looking at this year, and the estimate, like these 5-year spreadsheets were in the mid 200,000. So this is like almost double. It seems like a pretty big jump. So just wondering about that.
Yeah, we hadn't updated that 5-year forecast in several years, and a lot of it is inflation, and then a lot of it's just kind of a backlog of things that we hadn't gotten to. So the UPS is a good example of something that we hadn't, but what we have now is over 10 years old. The disaster recovery system, which is one that we hope to be awarded the grant to fund that. That's one that we didn't anticipate the cost of that with the servers we purchased last year. So yeah, it was largely a function of us not updating that. I don't think we updated that in a few years.
And this software, this budgeting software wasn't there either, Bridget.
I just wonder for the committee as a whole, not for you personally, Sean, like when things come in, like sort of like some things have been waiting in the queue for years and then other things come in like sort of, maybe they haven't been updated or sort of last minute, like how do we weigh those out and how do those relate, especially since we've got this concept that we're doing a 5-year planning process. So maybe that's something we discuss more as we go.
So if I could answer that, Kathy?
Sure.
So I would say that, like Sean said, he's updated some pricing and I've done a little bit of work while I haven't balanced the out years. If people have said, well, the cost of a new vehicle, let's just, because they're easy to think about, right, has gone from $45,000 to $60,000, then we change the every other year for that vehicle. We change that pricing out for the 5 years. The truth is, I mean, we should probably build an escalator in that every 5 years they go up. I don't know how much, but it's hard to say. And then I would also say, while his prices increase here, it really, if you take out the disaster recovery and the budgeting software, it's still it's like 250 versus 200, and that's the true inflation. And the other two projects are sort of standalone outside of his normal ask. Is that fair to say, Sean?
Yes.
Mhm. And I think that there was a small um, amount um, in the lines for not nearly $100,000. I think it might have been like $30,000 or $40,000 for departmental requests, because from time to time, Sean gets requests from, um, like they get specialty software. They updated in police or fire last year. They went to a new software, and these kind of things, they come up from time to time where software is no longer being updated, so they have to go to the new product. Didn't they do that with one of the ambulance reporting softwares last year or something?
Yeah, it was our fire,
Mhm.
the fire software they use that it
Right.
no longer supported the federal and state reporting requirements that they have. So
Right.
we were
So,
forced to change.
yeah. So they come up from time to time, you know, uh, hopefully not as expensive as this, but that's been happening with a lot of things lately, where we have technology and you'll see in other departments where communication equipment or is changing in the public safety arena, and so they're needing to. They can no longer, their old systems can no longer be supported, so they have to look at new systems. So that's sort of what happens to these kinds of technologies over time.
I'm not seeing any other hands, so I'll just follow up on two things. One on the budgeting software, Melissa.
Hmm.
As I understood it, and then you went kind of quickly over it, there is less expensive. So I think you don't have to answer it right now, but is there something at half the price that would do almost everything? Or what would we lose if we went to something less? So just looking at that, it as a question, and I like the idea that this software potentially could be used by the schools also. So the question of, could it be used by the regional schools? Could it be, it's already integrated with our elementary schools? So it's sort of a question.
Yeah. There's I talked with 3 different groups, and there's really 2 that I'm looking at, and certainly this is OpenGov, which we have in the town, um, with a totally different program that another service they offer. And then the other sort of main competition in Massachusetts, where I have peer communities looking at them, is something called ClearGov. So the ClearGov software only does budgets. It doesn't do financial reporting for the departments. It doesn't do interactive dashboards for internal communications or committee correspondence. And it doesn't do anything for the public outreach. So this software, the OpenGov, what comes included in it is this sort of financial reporting on all levels and this public outreach where we can do surveys, you know, have people click on a map and say, I want you to redo this park, or I think there should be a pavilion here, or I don't even know. I'm just making up stuff now. Or we need a traffic stop, like if we're doing a survey that way, it's a very interactive public engagement. None of that is offered on the other software. And then unfortunately, while this is very expensive upfront because it does do all of these things and it's going to be very labor intensive to implement it well, the problem is that once we get past the first year of the $100,000, that subscription cost is essentially the same.
Yep.
So the subscription cost for ClearGov was, I think, $30,000 a year. This is
Yep.
$35,000 a year.
Yep.
And this, we might have the savings of our other public engagement software. So it might actually be less over time with what I consider to be a better product.
And
Mm.
for peer governments, places like Northampton, are there some in our western region that are on your preferred system? I'm
So-
trying to get a sense of Boston might be on it, but is a Northampton on it, or Holyoke,
So-
big systems versus smaller?
So Holyoke is not, Northampton is not, but like Provincetown just recently went up. There were Eastern Mass communities that I know of, and I think there were some like Brewster. I saw the Cape. Somerville has one of them. I'm not sure which. Cambridge went with the third software that it's called. It's EUNA is the name of the company. Quizzica is the name of the software. I think Cambridge went with them, but they're the only Massachusetts community that had that one. And so that's why I'm less interested in it because I just know less about it. Locally, I can't remember. I typically looked at Eastern Mass communities that had the one that I liked. And then I talked with Sandy Pooler. Arlington has something, but it was a self-built program that people of Arlington built. So he said, they didn't have one of these, but they had something that they had developed themselves.
Any other questions on IT? I'm not seeing any, so Sean,
Oh,
we
I
can
think-
thank
I
you
think
very
one more-
much.
I think one more hand came up.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay, Nat's hand
Sorry.
is up, because
Yeah,
then,
one thing, just getting back to disaster recovery system and the grant application. If for some reason the grant does not come through this year, is that something that we could apply for next year? And if so, what would be the consequence for delaying that another year?
Yeah, our experience with that grant is every time we've applied for it, we've got it. So I think we have a pretty good shot at it. If we were to not get it this year, then we absolutely could apply for it next year. So I think we could we could potentially figure out a way to push it out a year. Or I guess if it is rejected by the state, finding out why the state doesn't like it or why they wouldn't approve it. So it's possible that we would apply for something else next year with that same grant. The grant is pretty open to basically any IT projects that improve the community. So there are other options. So if we didn't get it for this year, I think potentially consider applying for something else next year.
So, so that disaster recovery system, that's something that would absolutely need to be done in FY 26 if we want to put that off.
We potentially could limp along and push it out another year if we needed to.
I'm just comparing, I wasn't on the committee last year, but just looking at last year's report, it looks like there was 302,000 for IT. And without that 180,000, assuming we get the grant for the entire amount this year, the total would be 349 this year, not 529. So that 349 is still kind of closer to the ballpark of where we were last year. So just trying to put things in perspective.
Yeah.
And I think too, like Sean, I think he's applied for these grants in the past, and I think what he does is he puts them on here in the event that he doesn't get the entire amount funded. Like, so maybe he gets 150 and not the 180, so that you're not surprised when the 30 comes up for the balance. And then also, you know, sometimes the grants are competitive. Like, I know that with the Community Compact grant, you know, I've applied for it for different things, and sometimes, you know, just so many communities apply that you don't get it just because it wasn't your turn. You know what I mean? And then they just say, oh, apply next year, you'll get it next year, and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I know that, you know, one of Sean and I had a conversation about, could I apply for that Community Compact for this budgeting software? But because he's like, well, if we both apply for something, then we'll compete against each other. And his disaster recovery was a larger item. So that's why the decision was made to apply for the, you know, for the more expensive things. Is that fair to say, Sean?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that is done with questions on IT, which means, Sean, you can leave. And
Thank you.
And we can thank you very much for joining us. It's been
Thank you,
great.
everybody.
Mhm.
Have a
Thank
good night.
you.
So I want to just have a short discussion on minutes. There is a set of minutes in the packet, but our process has been is someone does them. And in the past, if I wasn't doing them, I then reviewed it. This time Sarah reviewed it and caught wording and a couple other things. So these have been reviewed, and we haven't gone through them and voted on them. We've just literally posted it. So I see this set from last week as 2 weeks ago as final, and Melissa can go ahead and post it as long as everyone's comfortable with that process. And then I will review. And when I review, we're posting the recordings by Friday of every week. So you can be taking notes while the meeting's happening, but then you can kind of check it because the recording gets up pretty fast to if you miss something, and you can cross-reference. You don't have to collect all the detail that we talked about because you can refer to see the table in the packet. So Sarah has volunteered for today, and she has already, I've seen her, as she said, she's taking notes. Everyone volunteered for a time except for Bridget and Hala. And so I'll come back to you on the dates that are still available. I'm looking forward, and then we can figure out which. So the dates that are still available, Bridget, are March 19th, April 2nd, April 9th, April 16th, and I can do the minutes for that last one. So I don't know whether you have a preferred one right now.
I sent an email and I said March 19th. Does that work?
Okay, that's great. I missed it. Got it. So then we have just one person. So then Sarah asked about format, and what we have done when it works is whatever the agenda for the meeting was. So today would be an exception for this because Melissa was able to get the 5-year information in, but we use the topics that are in the agenda to divide up the minutes.
Mhm.
And then it's a Word document. So you can get the minutes from the last meeting, and it already says, here are the attendees, here are Melissa's name, which I was misspelling for quite some time, Melissa, with not putting the Z in the right place. But all of that's already in, and then you can just go to the discussion of the day and wipe out the previous minutes. So we try to make it as simple as possible as a Word document to just work on. And I will send Sarah again, well, she already has it, the Word document from the prior meeting, and then you can just continue from that point on. So we've tried to spend as little time with the minutes as possible. I do have one question about our meetings. We've got Wednesdays as meetings, and in my role as chair, I am going to be gone on April 2nd and April 9th, 2 of the Wednesdays as we go forward. So I will see how far we are by mid-March, over the next couple weeks. It's possible we might skip one of those, or if we needed to try to go a bit longer on others and or reschedule. But we have to have a meeting where we discuss our what we want to say in the report, and then write a report and approve a report. And for the most part, that's at the end, so the questions we just asked for just an add-on, if we need to balance the budget, do we take the 180 out? Because we're going to either assume a grant or we're going to assume we apply for it next year. So that gets us nearer to balancing. Those are the kind of discussions we could have about this. And 180 doesn't get us all the way balanced, but Melissa has brought us closer to balancing. And then she can come back with, well, one of these could be debt financed. If we go through all the projects and think they are all so high priority, we can't see anything else big to get rid of. One of the questions I will have Lee about the library is, do we need to be buying computers if the library is going to be closed for 2 years, being a temporary workspace, that maybe you have enough equipment, and that's only a 30 or 40,000, but it's money, and if we don't need to budget, we don't need to budget for it. So those are the kinds of discussions when we come back, if we can get through all the big departments and vehicles. And then Bridget, you wisely, I think, which we haven't done, is been looking at all 4 years and saying, are we pretty sure that at least the biggies are on the list? With the best guess on the price tags on them. We don't have to get it balance, but we should probably at least talk about how out of balance it is and draw attention to it looking forward. So I think that's all I had to say just on minutes and then looking forward. And I see Melissa's hand is up. Go ahead, Melissa.
Yeah,
And then,
so I did want to say that as we get into the other departments, there are other items like this 180 where people have grant opportunities. So as out of balance as it is, there are other opportunities out there that we can talk about. It's just that they haven't been, they haven't gotten that award letter yet. So they need to say, I need to do this. We're doing the best we can to do it a different way. And so, hope is that, with 180 here, and I know of another fairly large item, we could close that gap pretty quickly. And then, maybe then we're talking about, well, if that's the case, do we restore something, because certainly everything that was asked for hasn't even been presented at this time, just because it was so far out that it just wasn't possible.
and Melissa, could I just ask,
Mhm.
I think it would be good to post these as 2-hour meetings as you
Okay.
start to have the big departments.
Mhm.
If people are okay with that, if we can, I can try to be as efficient as possible, but it will help us get through whichever departments are ready. Sarah?
Oh, I just wanted to remind you or tell everyone, I'll be away. I'll miss the next meeting. And I'm leaving town on Saturday morning, so I will get the minutes to you, Kathy, by Friday night.
Okay.
Sarah,
Yeah.
Sarah, so I should tell the schools that maybe next meeting is not the best time for them, because I had put that out there for them.
I would really appreciate that, as long
Okay.
as Bridget
Yeah.
is not going to be away like the next week.
Right. Okay.
Thank you. Thanks for mentioning that.
So people can potentially, will be 2-hour meetings, and that would be allow us to, when you look at this list of projects in the thing, Melissa can schedule some of the big ones in terms of big groups. And if we can get through in an hour and a half, but that will be great. So I'm not saying we will definitely go, but we managed to talk a lot about IT today. So,
Mhm.
so do I see, I'm just looking around the room for, I know Nat, you gave me a date that you were going to miss too. So that's fine. You know, people just let us know. And I think we are otherwise, Bob.
Yeah,
hand is-
Kathy, we need to have someone designated as the chair for the next meeting, since both you and Sarah are going to be away.
No, I'll be here.
Will you
I'm,
be here for next
mine
year?
is April.
Okay.
Mine is, I'm good for all of March. I won't
Okay.
be, I will be here the whole time. Not to worry. Yeah, Sarah.
I think the agenda said we'd take public comment, so I just want to note that, and there are no
This-
attendees.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
we
I
don't
see
have-
no, yeah, so I was gonna open it up for public comments and I
Okay.
keep clicking, Sarah, and there aren't any
Okay.
public. So therefore, the agenda can say what we had last time, no public.
Mhm.
Thank you very much for reminding me. So is everyone comfortable with drawing the meeting to a close? Yes, so I'm just going to say we are adjourned and it is 5:22. Thank you all very much. And Melissa, thank you for getting us. I know the amount of work that went into the tables that you put in. And we can expect to have a discussion back on those tables as we hit the other departments. So thank you for pulling.
Yeah,
that
and I'll
together.
try and update them as we have new information so that, like if we know that a grant is awarded and that gap comes down or something like that.
That's great.
Yeah, so Melissa, if you're doing such a great job, you're actually undercutting your argument for getting a new system.
Okay.
Well, I'll just say, she told us in finance that when she has to hand enter some of the numbers
Oh,
in a quarterly report and then double check that she didn't have a typo, I'm going, oh, not with a,
not good.
not
Okay.
with a quarterly. And it was because of the allocation. It wasn't that you didn't have the number, but
Right.
allocating it to the right slots.
Yep.
So that was kind of cringeworthy to hear that. So thank you very much.
All
Thank
right.
you, everyone. We are adjourned now at 5:23.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks.
See you
Bye.
next week.
Bye.